All emotions, all parts of ourselves, they are there for a reason. So, like you mentioned earlier, when we talk about the experience of anxiety, which is usually tied to worry or fear, it's usually a worry or fear about the future. But here's a question I want to ask everybody. Can you be afraid of a future if it hadn't happened yet? Can you be afraid of something that you have no data for? So is it worry or fear of the future, or is it a worry or fear of repeating a past? Hey, what is going on? Samson Odusanya here, breathwork facilitator and guide with the mission of helping you feel alive. So I'm here today on the Ever Forward Radio, where we discuss the power of the breath, being present and connecting deeply with our bodies and ourselves in a way that can help us live a more empowered life.
Well, let me just say, Samson, welcome to Ever Forward Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Just kind of tapped in, tapped out, didn't get the full experience. I was part work and part participant, but you just led a breathwork session here. Beautiful Austin. You guys are watching the video. We're literally staring at downtown Austin here with our homies from Painkiller for their Work in Progress event. And, it really kind of got me thinking about listening to you, participating with breathwork, and reminding me of all the times I have done breathwork under the lens today of what does it mean to be a work in progress? This practice, this breathwork that I'm doing now, it kind of just reframed the whole situation for me. So I'm going to ask you out of the gate, man, when you think of being a work in progress, what does that mean to you, and how would you apply that through the lens of what you do in breathwork?
Yeah. So when I think about being a work in progress, I just think about the human story. I think about, the microcosm of the human story, but how much we're a whole that's part of a bigger whole that's always evolving. And if something is always evolving, that means something is always in the form of progression. So there is no destination, right, ideally. And then tying it to breath, one of the most fundamental truths I love about the breath is how breath is life. Breath is life. And without breathing, we're ideally dead, literally. But the act of breathing, the act of the inhale and the exhale, and the practice of it consciously and unconsciously can almost give us a nudge, right? Or remind us when things are not as easy and they're challenging, that there's work to be done and we could keep making the progress. As long as there's breath in our lungs, we can keep moving forward.
I love it. Yeah. I love it, man. And being at an event like this is such a cool dynamic as well, because we're here to connect. And I heard that word a lot in your session, but really connection. Let's reconnect with ourselves. Let's connect right now. Let's get back to connection with ourselves. Yeah. And both are existing right here. We're at this event. You guys can probably hear the yoga session going on behind me. But the dynamic of connecting to the world and our world, how would you navigate that? Do you feel like stepping stones are my world and then the world, kind of like the inner self, so that we can show up better out? Or do we need to kind of remember that we are part of a bigger system and bring that to our own individual practice?
That's a great question. I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a yes and. Because if we look at the world, right, the world is the world. The world is the world. But the world and how we see it is a reflection of our inner world. So there's actually a big difference between the world and our world. And oftentimes we may think that our world is the world. But it is. And that's a mere reflection. It's a culmination of all the parts of ourselves that has formulated this perception, if you will, or the identity that we carry that is having us see the world the way it is. So when we can connect with ourselves in the way we understand who we are, we understand what makes us tick, we understand how we operate, we're able to listen presently to what's happening in our body, then we can take conscious control of how we perceive the world so we can interact with it in a way that's healthy. And, something as simple as relationship, like let's say you and I just met you not too long ago. For me, it's taken a lot of work to really unpack the layers of, insecurities that would have had me judge myself in the presence of other people, thinking that they're making up stories about me when it's not even the truth. And then normally what it is just my own distortion. So if I'm able to work through the distortions and get to the truth of who I am, then how I move and interact in the world there's more ease to it. There's more ease because it's ideally not so much about what's outside of me, it's about what's inside of me. And then what's inside of me reflects what's outside of it.
What would you recommend to somebody who wants to like really just take what you just said and apply it maybe for the first time or the first time in a long time?
This is good. Very simple. And in my work, I've noticed how much people aren't literally breathing. Figuratively, but aren't breathing efficiently, aren't breathing normally. And that in itself affects our health. It affects how we perceive ourselves. It affects even the connection with ourselves. So I would start off by telling somebody, take some deep breaths. And then once you take some deep breaths, you'll notice and feel viscerally what happens. Like you're dropped immediately into what's real, what's present. And oftentimes we're not there because we're somewhere else. We're either in our past, always trying to fix it, or
ruminate.
We're always ruminating. We're always in the future trying to, protect ourselves or worrying about something not happening, trying to kind of separate ourselves from an unfamiliar.
Living in anxiety, really, stuck in the future.
Yeah, man. So we're rarely ever present because this is also the working of the mind, working of the egoic mind. It's always oscillating in the name of protecting us. So I think when we can create a practice of checking in constantly, just by taking some deep breaths, and then is how often can you incorporate and integrate the practice of consciously breathing to where you're more present. And when you're more present, you can see the truth. And when you can see the truth, then you can know how to kind of move and direct yourself.
Yeah,
so
true.
Yeah.
I love that answer. And what you just said kind of got me thinking differently. When we're stuck in the past, trying to dwell on a memory, redo it in our minds, ruminate on what coulda, shoulda, woulda, or the anxiety when we're too far ahead, when we're thinking about an hour from now or a month from now. You mentioned this kind of like to keep us safe. Do you feel then like the default for most people that the present is unsafe? And that's why it takes so much work to drop into it and stay there?
Yes.
Interesting.
And simply because, so if we think about a past situation, so a past situation or a past event at one point was a present.
Yeah.
And it was a present that, let's say, a very intense or very traumatic, if you will, or very, very challenging event happened that we were unable to be with, we were unable to process. Well, now that present is not complete. So now we are carrying that present, aka the past, into a new present.
It's in like unfinished work.
So it's always, so it's not because we're not ruminating because we want to ruminate. We're ruminating because that's how we're set up.
Our brain is like, we haven't closed that loop.
We haven't closed the loop yet.
Fascinating.
We haven't closed the loop yet. So the ego, one that, its job is to help us come up with an identity and formulate that, is also good at resisting reality. It'd rather seek pleasure than pain. So for us, if we've associated this past event as painful, the last thing we're going to do is be there, because now what happens when we take a breath, or what happens when we get present, is we may have to actually face the stuff that comes forward. And if we're not ready for that, we'll run away from it.
And what you just said is honestly what I hear so often, probably the most often, when I'm talking to somebody, a friend, a client, or whoever, about their curiosity of work like this, of breath work, of any kind of unique modality that might introduce an altered state of consciousness. Breath work is definitely one of those. That's what comes up most out of their mouths, in my experiences. I'm afraid of what's going to come up. I don't know if I want to face that yet. But everybody, human experience, we're way more inclined to like, let me escape it. Let me caffeinate. Let me get drunk. Let me escape.
Let me chase a different high.
Let me work out. Any kind of escape, no matter how we kind of navigate it as good, bad, vice, or other. Why do you think that is? Why are we so afraid of what might come up when we recognize clearly that it's important?
Yeah, well, the thing is, we don't know. It's very unconscious. We actually have no idea. And, again, back to the past, oftentimes a lot of past events happen when we're very young, when we're still developing. And for instance, as children, we are egocentric as children. So part of our development It's not that, we're selfish when I say egocentric. No, part of our development is to take responsibility for what happened, either bad or good. So now if we take responsibility for something that happened that wasn't so good or bad, if you will, while not having the resources or the ability or capacity to be with it, now this becomes something that is lodged into our body, lodged into our system, that's very, again, that's very difficult, if you will. And as you've been in the space for a little bit. As humans, we rarely go for things that are difficult. One, it takes too much energy. Two, to the system, it's like a threat. Why would I do something hard?
Exactly. Why would I induce stress?
Why? Yeah. Right? But it's in the, so something like breath, it's in the modality, and it's not just breath itself, but I would kind of say all these modalities, if you will, help you get present. It puts you in a flexible state to get present. And what actually gets to happen is, it's beyond breathwork. It's about eliciting the safety within yourself, right? To witness, to feel, to confront, to be with those very difficult parts of yourself that were
to love,
and
to
ultimately
love.
come to that.
Yeah.
And
sorry to skip to the end there.
no, yes, without judgment, and to literally get to a place of acceptance. And I think another side of the question is why it's difficult for a lot of us to, sometimes be present with these things is because in some way, shape, or form, we've judged them as separate from us.
Yeah.
We've judged them as, this is not me. This is not me. And, I mean, we ideally kind of need opposites in order to exist, right? So we've judged maybe a quality as not acceptable. So we keep it pushed away. But if you look at what it is to be human,
everybody's got those.
Everybody.
And will again, probably. Yeah.
At all times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard you talk about in your session this other aspect of meeting your body where you're at. I think is another great unique aspect to breath work and mindfulness or just awareness in general. I think oftentimes in life we have a stressor, right? We're in stress, we're in anxiety, having a hard day. We're not really respecting, I think, the physiological state as much as the mental and emotional. It's all there present together. Yeah. Can you kind of unpack this concept of de-escalation by meeting our bodies where we're at?
Yeah. And there's this quote by Viktor Frankl, who's a survivor of the Holocaust. He's the author of Man's Search for Meaning. And he said, in between stimulus and response, there's a space. And that space is our ability to choose. And that's where our power lies, to be able to choose, right? Or make a choice that can help us create freedom. When something happens like the experience of anxiety, the natural inclination is to fix it. Like something is wrong.
Let me get out of this state.
Let me get out of this state.
As fast as possible.
And if you'll notice, the more we try to fix it, or we judge it as wrong, there's more resistance that's created. So it's like there's resistance to something. And then once we see it as wrong or we judge it as less than, there's more resistance. And then there's more resistance on top of the resistance. So when I say meet yourself where you're at, first it takes practice, but it's noticing that the anxiety, for example, is showing up for a reason. Mm-hmm. It's a signal. It's an alarm.
I think if no one gets anything else out of this, that right there is one of the most tangible takeaways. If you can remember that, this is a teacher. This is here for a reason. This isn't just a failure of my system.
Right. Yeah. Right. And all emotions, all parts of ourselves, they are there for a reason. So like you mentioned earlier, when we talk about the experience of anxiety, which is usually tied to worry or fear, it's usually a worry or fear about the future. But here's a question I want to ask everybody. Can you be afraid of a future if it hadn't happened yet? Can you be afraid of something that you have no data for? So is it worry or fear of the future, or is it a worry or fear of repeating a past that may have caused you a lot of danger?
This is some interstellar personal work right here, everybody.
Right? So oftentimes it's like these experiences show up. Sometimes, I would say, not all the times, because This is the mind repeating something that was not complete that the heart wants to heal. So it's like, can we slow down time enough to see that, okay, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just showing up because it wants to get my attention. So anxiety, okay, I'm worrying. I'm in fear. What am I in worry or fear about? Okay, well, this person may not call me tomorrow. Okay, well, what's happening right now? Take a deep breath. Take 2 more. What's happening right now? Well, it's not tomorrow. It's 5 o'clock today. What can I control right now? What step can I take right now to be able to regulate myself in a way that's going to help me make an empowering decision or choice? Because if I'm in tomorrow, then I'm denying what's here right now. So what's here is, all right, I'm experiencing some tightness in my chest. I'm experiencing a racing heartbeat. I'm experiencing some agitation in my system. That is top priority, not if this person's going to text me tomorrow.
Yeah.
And once I can meet that, like in a very slow, methodical, and safe way, then I'm letting my body know that I'm listening. And once I let my body know that I'm listening, then there's more communication between it in a way that I can help really, really move through something that would have broken me.
Listening, and then next step has got to be kind of a reminder of the body and whatever fight or flight red flag is going off that like, hey, no, actually I'm in control.
Yes.
So then how do we go from awareness and, hey, I'm listening to kind of taking back the wheel of the ship?
Awareness, then tap into the body through sensing what's there. So sensations.
What do you mean by that? Yeah, like literally feeling?
Literally feeling. So there's a ton of sensations, and there's a check-in process I have people go through. It's like, okay, you notice that something is off. Okay, tune into your body and notice what you're feeling. There are tingles. You notice if you're hot or cold. You notice if your palms are sweaty, right? And then maybe tie the sensations to, asking yourself, is there an emotion that I'm currently experiencing?
Oh, yeah. Powerful question. Necessary question.
And then once you're able to identify what that is, and it's like you're collecting more data, and that's all it is, because the mind is looking, it's trying to rationalize what's going on, but you can't find the answer in your head. The body's speaking a lot more. So once you're able to kind of find that, it's like, all right, well, what tools do I have in my back pocket to help me regulate myself right now? That's it. Take some breaths. Settle yourself. Obviously, there's a world of somatics where you can, there's somatic techniques where you can really be with your body. But ultimately, when we talk about meeting yourself where you're at, is not wishing that you were somewhere else, something else, or anyone else.
Love that, yeah.
It's like, let me just be with myself where I'm at and work through, right, what I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah, that's even another form of escape, I would say. That's, I think probably the most immediate for most people is I just want to think about anything else. I want to distract myself and go anywhere else other than where I'm at now. You might not actually reach for a vice, air quote here, healthy or unhealthy habit or escape. But even just by changing our thoughts where we're at mentally is still an escape. We're not honoring, we're not listening. And I think that I would be willing to bet, I wonder your take here, is probably where most people are, because I think if we're there, then, or I should say if we're not there, that's probably why so much of this is landing for somebody right now.
Yeah.
Because they haven't stepped out, they haven't gotten outside of that. They're still there and not here.
And it's not wrong. I always like to say there's a reason for why everything happens.
Of course.
There's a reason for why we do certain things. And if we think of our systems, it's built for survival first. So it's going to choose the thing that is going to help it survive. So if thinking is a quick way to not feel pain, I'm going to do that 9 times out of 10 until I can consciously interrupt that pattern, that loop. And most of the time what that entails when I consciously interrupt something is doing the opposite of what I normally would do.
It makes me think of even like an extreme example of just like how powerful our bodies are.
Oh my gosh.
When in repeated or even acute hyper stress situations, this is where people literally develop psychosis, multiple personality, split personality disorder out of a autonomic response to survival and safety.
Autonomic response.
How many times do we hear about this, see about this, extreme examples, again, serial killers, rapists, insert any non-positive contributor to society here, a lot of them go back to, it's like they're literally out of their minds. I'm not saying this is the case in every time, but you go back to like a root cause, most of the time you're going to have a situation where out of survival, they separated and they stayed over there.
And this is something I'll say. A lot of people are actually disassociated from their bodies. They're out. They're checked out. I like to use this example. It's like you think of a plane that's about to land, it calls control center to get clearance. Well, we've been calling to get clearance, and there's no clearance for landing because there's still unresolved stuff that we haven't met. So like we're literally hovering.
Wow.
We're hovering over our bodies because we're disassociated from it. And we're disassociated because a lot of past things that we just have not had the capacity to feel, be with, or process.
Dude, that's such a great analogy. I'm getting this most amazing, beautiful visual imagery right now of just like this potential plane air traffic controller, and we're both, just completely separated inside.
And then biologically, dude, Chase, it's like more and more, I think in the next 10 to 20 years, we're gonna notice the shift in how we prescribe or diagnose, and I say that word very
100%.
loosely.
Yeah.
And how we relate to ourselves is going to go to a more body-based approach. Biologically speaking, if we look at something like the vagus nerve, which is, again, the main and principal component of our parasympathetic nervous system, it's comprised of 80% afferent fibers, which are literally fibers that carry information from the body to the brain. 80%, 4 times more than the brain to the body.
Wow.
So that's already saying how much we're feeling beings.
And this is not by choice, people. You can't just be like, all right, shut down lane 1 through 3,
No.
Yeah.
No, but then we have a culture that speaks to always, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think there's a time and place to analyze something, rationalize, intellectualize. I believe in rationale, right? Because that's when you're neutral and you come to a measured place, that's when you can use your rationale.
Absolutely, yeah.
I believe in that. But even Einstein spoke to the power of intuition being the master of the mind. Right? The mind is the servant to the body. But I think just because of how we've been set up to focus so much on intellect, knowledge, thinking, mindset, we've forgotten this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forgotten the heart, we've forgotten the gut, which so much research is coming out how that's a massive part of our being.
I used to think that, to that point, the brain was always driving the ship. And, over the years, we're learning more and more about how much of our immune system, of our hormones, of our really driving force and everything. Even some circles, I'll say, kind of go the whole, like, your spiritual essence lives inside there. I'm fast on that track of thought now. Like, I really do think the gut physiologically is driving, biochemically even to some point, driving the ship way more, and it's sending the signals to the brain to then the brain, send everything else out.
Billions of organisms that live in there, all in all, it's like getting back to how we're biologically designed. Like, we're more feeling beings first. We're feeling beings that really feel. And I think
we've forgotten that.
There's so much that plays into that, but there's so much faith with a vision, if you will, or hope, because if you look at this event, people are asking for this.
Yeah.
Consciousness is asking to come back to here because this has not been working. It's not. It works, but it's not work. It doesn't work when it's in separation of the other part.
We've just left it running in the background when just waiting to be invited back in.
Yeah.
Speaking of, another part, what I love about, I've heard in your session this morning, and I've heard and felt and been reminded of in many other breathwork sessions, is how often we are feeling different things, and just by shifting awareness, we don't fully realize it. What I mean by that exactly is, for me, always when the facilitator reminds us to relax the tongue from the roof of the mouth, up to that point, I thought I was sitting there, I'm chilling, I'm in my namaste position, I'm just like, I'm breathing, my eyes are closed. And then I'm like, oh yeah, until I brought that awareness into it, my tongue was sealed, pressed up against the roof of my mouth. So then that made me relax even more here and now. But what it also did was get me thinking of how many other times throughout the day when, Eric, what I think I'm relaxed, I think I'm chilling, my body is still feeling something. It's holding on to that stress, that whatever. So again, just another point I want to make of how often, how much more we're feeling. And it takes something like breath work or just a quick second to check in with your body to go, oh, no, I'm not actually.
Right. And I mean, I'll speak to that too, like taking breath work away, because sometimes it's like, and it's becoming a really, really popular modality, which I love. But it's not even about the big breathwork sessions. It's not about, because I mean, it's not about that. It's about who you are and how you're breathing on an everyday basis. You know, you can go to a breathwork session, great, and have a, big experience, big release, but when you come back home, are you going to do the same thing? So the biggest thing is like, okay, when you have a big session like that, what we're doing is now we're creating an flexible state where we can witness something that was unable to witness, be with something that was uncomfortable, and then choose to accept it. And in doing that, we're relating to it in a different way. But then you come to a fork in the road where, okay, am I going to keep the loop going, or can I choose something different?
Once you know,
yes,
you got options.
That's what's helped me. I love the big breathwork sessions over the years, and I've had quite a number of them. But it's like, how am I breathing on an everyday basis? Like if I, for instance, get into a disagreement with my wife, it's like, can I check in? How am I breathing? What's happening right now?
Oh, in relationships, definitely in my marriage too. Like I'm telling you, here's the secret, guys. I'm telling you, even just in a mild conflict, maybe at work or with a person out in public, you introduce a breath into a heated discussion. Oh my,
changes everything.
Your future self's going to thank you. Let me tell you,
changes everything,
especially in relationship.
Changes everything. Yeah. And I mean, it just speaks to most of who we are is unconscious. I think, what is it, 95%, might be even more than that, is unconscious. So when you talked about the roof, the tongue in the roof, you didn't even know you were doing, because it's unconscious.
And I was thinking I was relaxed. I was thinking I was just, how much more relaxed could I get? I feel everything. I'm chilling. Oh no, wait, hold on. There's actually a lot of pressure still going on here.
I just thought of something. Ooh. So imagine you thought you were relaxed. That's a level of relaxation that you thought. Right? Now someone else cued that you weren't as relaxed. Now imagine there's another level under that, and under that, and under that, and under that. Yeah. So the idea of what we think something is only one level of how much
we get closer
really
and closer and closer. And look how much better we feel each and every time.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes. I say that we really go back to where we came from once we become aware of it.
Part of me originally, all this kind of concept reminds me of the aspect of like coming home, but like it's like that, but that's a better way to say it. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. When did all this kind of happen for you? I heard you kind of mention briefly, like when you found breathwork, these consciousness practices.
So, 17 years young, we had a big, I'll say, conscious interrupting event happen in our family. I grew up in the East Coast, like I mentioned, and that was an opportunity for me to start to question my reality the way I knew it. So I asked the big questions: who am I? What am I? What am I here for?
At 17.
At 17.
Wow, man, that's huge.
At 17. Because at a very young age, it's just, I think we all have it.
Are we listening?
Or are we in environments that don't give us the permission to actually continue practicing that? So
most likely at 17, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe. Like pockets, I love people watching. So I would always ask like certain questions. But at 17, I asked those questions, and it led me to start like being curious about certain books, certain philosophies. And all in all, I started reading a bunch of books, different genres, mainly personal growth, self-help. Let's say that. Self-help, spiritual and esoteric works. So it started to stretch my mind, started to stretch my imagination, started to stretch my perception of what I thought reality was. And so that led me down this path of, really working on myself, my personal growth journey. So the books, seminars, the workshops, the coaching, the mentoring, and it worked. It got me to certain levels. But I'm not sure if you've experienced this. You've done so many things, and there's still another layer that's tapping you. Like there's something else. So
you might not even know what it is, but you get a feeling. Again, there's that intuition.
And what that was for me was I'd start something new or start a new habit, but I couldn't sustain it. I changed the actions, did everything, but I couldn't sustain it. That frustrated me. So a friend invited me in 2014 to a breathwork session. And I remember after that session was done, I literally come up gasping for air, and I said, like, what the fuck was that?
Wow.
And I look at my friend and nodding because they knew.
Yeah.
I noticed in that session how much I again, it's back to what you were saying. I thought I was relaxed. I thought I was expressed, but how much was still stuck in me.
I thought I was self-helped.
I thought I was healed, right? But there was so much that I let out in that session, so much in tears, physical expressions that I didn't know was stored in there. And I like to say that was one of the markers in my journey that I could vividly remember that started to develop a new relationship with not just my emotions, but my tears.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Wasn't expecting that. That's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't afraid of them, but I judged them because I was told as a kid, stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. So, like, I learned to, kind of manipulate myself.
Tears are not safe. There we go back to safety, always.
Yeah, tears are not safe to cry. So that night, my eyes were just waterworks, and it wasn't to like no specific event or memory. There was just what my body needed to express.
Yeah.
It was just what my body needed to vibrate out. So again, curiosity completely driven to that modality, and I just learned and I just studied, and I again learned the power of this tool that's so readily available and sometimes so overlooked. But how by just breathing it in a certain way, I can achieve a connection with myself that I wouldn't have had before. So that is what started to spark a new way of growth, if you will, a new way of deepening the relationship with myself. I mean, one of a quote or a saying or an adage that has always led my life is know thyself and you'll know.
Not a bad one.
Know thyself and you'll know God. And that's always been my thing. I've been always curious to know myself at a deeper level. And that is the bridge that's helped me know everybody.
Yeah.
That's the bridge that's helped me know everybody.
I feel you on that. Absolutely.
So, and then over the years, I made a personal practice of mine. Like I walked the talk, and then it wasn't until like 4 years ago where the community that brought me in and taught me and trained me, like looked at me and was like, listen, because I was already helping people with health and nutrition and fitness. But even that, I noticed that there was another layer.
Yes, dude. This is what I like secretly wish we would get taught this. And like, I went to undergrad for exercise science, right? Or anybody that gets this background or just does this work. Yep. I firmly believe you eventually get to what we're talking about now.
You have to.
I'm like, why weren't they teaching this before I got exercise programming or meal plan? No. Let's go hear the head and the heart first.
Yes.
I feel like we can just skip to the front of the line more.
Yes.
To adherence, to purpose, to meaning, to that hidden layer.
Yes.
Dude.
And it was so, for one thing I noticed about my clients, I'm like, all right, some of them would start and they would stop. They would start and they would stop. And I just, concept or theory in my head, I was like, why is this? And then when I started to do this work with myself, I noticed, they may not feel safe losing weight because they've identified themselves as this person. It's not safe for them to let this version of them go.
Yeah.
So you start to incorporate this type of work, you're settling somebody in a way where they can start to feel safe taking these new actions. Right? But it's like,
or a different type of work.
Yes.
The same work got you to that point. You need different work to then cross that next threshold.
Yes. Because if I all of a sudden just want to lose weight just because, someone judged me or I judged myself or someone on social media says blah, 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 and I start taking immediate action, what happens is I'm letting my system know that something is wrong. More resistance. And whatever we don't create enough space and time to gradually practice and integrate, it's going to fall away because it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I got an example I want to share with you. And I've shared it a couple of times on the show before. When I was in my coaching practice, I had this one client. We'll call her Sarah. And Sarah, we were working together for probably close to 2 years.
Wow.
And for the first time in over a decade, we got her under 300 pounds. It took a while, and it took all the things, but she was committed, and so was I. We had a great team as well. But then after that, she began missing our group sessions. She would always reschedule our one-on-one. And I was like, Sarah, what's going on?
Yeah.
And she shared with me this experience that, like, I had this blow up at work of feeling unsafe around this presence of a male that made me question, like, why did I act that way? Long story short, she was always the biggest of her sisters and her mother and her family. Everyone else was sexually harassed and abused, like emotionally, physically, except for her because she was bigger. So she was like, my body won't let me get small again because it's unsafe.
Because if it gets small, I may get the same thing that happened.
I'm going to get it. They're going to get it worse. And so to our point earlier of like the tools that we had got us to that point. And I was like, okay, we're going to pause on our stuff together. We're going to go a different route. We're going to get you referred out to mental health therapy and a psychologist.
Good for you.
And so like, it was just like that for me was the biggest, still to this day, I haven't been in practice in years, still to this day, the biggest aha moment of we need to get there sooner.
And it's so funny. I've done this time and time again where I default to trying to change my actions instead of trying to change the physiology that's taking the action, like the underlying issues of why I'm even taking these actions in the first place. And yes, I'm all for taking actions, but they have to be aligned in a way where your mind, body, spirit, and emotions are in line with it.
Yeah, not to say that other actions won't help you,
right.
But I wholeheartedly agree. When we bring all that into alignment, the amount of clarity, and it's like, it's not even work at that point. We're no longer pushing ourselves.
Yes.
We're being pulled.
Yes.
We're being pulled.
Yes. Good distinction. So good, man.
Well, Samson, I'm going to try to keep everybody's background music to a minimal here. The club's back thumping here, Club Painkiller.
Jumping.
So I'm going to wrap it up here, man. But it's been a pleasure to sit and talk with you. Thank you so much.
So good.
This is another reminder. This is why I love coming to events like this and talking to people like you, of a modality to wellness that I have always found value in, but I don't do enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a great reminder of like how often am I walking around stressed, holding my tongue to the roof of my mouth. So I'm like, all right, Chase, this serves you. Take it with you. Do it more.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take this home with me, man. Thank you.
So good. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. All right. And we're going to have all your information for everybody down in the show notes, video notes. Yep. But where are you hanging out the most online? Where they connect with you right now?
I'm on Instagram right now, so that's where you can find me.
It's Samson Strength, right?
Samson's_strength.
Okay, yeah. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Painkiller. And thank you, Samson.
Awesome.
All right, man.